Welcome to our video on Year 10 evolution, and in this video we are looking at changes over generations. So as we start to investigate this whole topic of evolution, we start with the man himself, Charles Darwin. Now, Charles Darwin proposed a process by which species change over many generations. Later, after Darwin's time, the theory of natural selection was actually drawn up by using a lot of his works along with Mendel's work. But this was before the whole concept of genetics was ever discovered, so he worked very heavily on features of organisms. Once it was discovered, once genetics was discovered, it supported all of Darwin's initial works. So if you remember, Mendel worked in the world of genetics as such, even before understanding DNA and genes and that concepts of genetics. But Mendel worked in that area looking at his pea plants, and then his work supported Darwin's, which led to the theory of evolution being developed, the theory of natural selection being developed as part of evolution. Now, when we're actually looking at evolution itself, evolution is a change in the genetic makeup of a species over multiple generations. We're talking over a very, very, very long period of time. It is observed via a modification, so a change of physical and behavioural characteristics. Genetic change in the characteristics of a species over many generations, resulting in the formation of a new species. Okay, so if you look at species today and look back over thousands of years to where their origins have come from, you will see there is a great change to those species. So, put very basically, evolution is descent with modification. And when you think about it, even with things that are developed man-made, so think of the mobile phone. Mobile phones are modified to become more useful. Okay, and when you think of living organisms over millions of years, they adapt to cope with their surroundings in a very similar way. So, descent with modification. Okay, so before we look further into evolution, we need to understand this concept of genetic variation. Okay, now evolution cannot occur without genetic variation, without some kind of changes to gene patterns. Variation, or diversity as we can call it, is very important for ensuring an organism's fitness, okay, and therefore its survival. How well does it suit its environment in that fitness? Now, there are three primary sources of genetic variation. There's mutation, there's gene flow, and then there's sex. So how variation can occur through the process of meiosis. So let's look at each of these a little closer. Now, when we talk about mutation, we're talking about changes to the gene. So if you think back to our work on genetics at the start of year 10, okay, just remembering the structures that we had. So we had that DNA that made our chromosomes, and we said that small sections of the chromosome were called genes, and we had different genes on each chromosome, and they were called alleles. Yeah? Okay, so mutation occurs when there's a change to the gene structure. Now, how we understand those changes to that gene structure is we need to remember that our DNA is made of those base pairs, okay? You remember those rungs along the ladder were made up of those base pairs. Now, mutation occurs when there's changes in the pattern of those bases. So what makes the rungs on the ladder, there's changes to them, and there's lots of different types of mutations that can occur. Okay, so if we look at these, and you're not expected to remember these, but it gives you an idea what we're talking about. So one type, imagine this is your gene, okay, or it's a whole chromosome. Now, one type of mutation is a deletion, so where that whole section of the chromosome or part of the gene is deleted. So you see we have a long chromosome, it gets shorter. Another type of mutation is where a section of the gene duplicates. So we've got one there, and then we've got two sections of that gene there. Inversion, so we've got the section of gene and it actually flips. Okay, another type of mutation is insertion. So we've got the gene there and we've had a different chromosome is inserted. So we've got the chromosome 4. Chromosome 20 is actually inserted into it, okay, and we've got swaps and that have occurred. So no, a section of chromosome 4 is inserted into chromosome 20. You see, in chromosome 20 it's got a lot longer, so that's an insertion. And another one is a translocation, so where parts of chromosomes actually swap. So different kinds of mutations there, but you can see it is these things that then can cause variation, because they cause a change into gene sequences, and then there's a change in that feature of the organism. Now, if we've got these mutations occurring, and when I say mutations, they're not necessarily a bad thing, but variation, a difference in species, is due to gene mutation. So red hair, blonde hair, brown hair, they're all mutations of the same gene. Now, when you have got these mutations, organisms of the same species mate, okay, and these mutations get them passed on, okay, and we have this flow of genes through ancestry, okay, and that gene flow is what passes on variation. Meiosis, okay, another way of variation. So back in when we did the genetics unit, we looked at the process of mitosis, which was one body cell or one somatic cell dividing into two identical daughter cells. Yeah. Now, another process, what makes our gametes, is called meiosis, and we're not going to go into that in too much detail. But when you look at this image here, if you look at the middle stage, meiosis 2, you'll see that something quite cool occurs. So you've got the red chromosome and the blue chromosome, and during meiosis 1, a process called crossing over occurs, where they actually swap part of their chromosome, which is really important, because that, along with another process that I'll show you in a minute, does enable or allow genetic variation to occur. So you see we've got here at the end of meiosis 2, we've got our 4 gametes. Two gametes have a chromosome identical to the mother, one's identical to the father, but then these two have actually part of the mother's and part of the father's. So we've got a nice rich mix of genetic information there. Now, having a look at this one, we see here we have the process of crossing over that I just talked about, but add that as well to the fact that when the chromosomes align ready for one of the division steps, they can align completely randomly. So they could align all the reds and all the greens, or they could align 2 greens, 1 red, 2 reds, 1 green. They could align 2 reds, 1 green, like that. So all this variation allows for amazing genetic variability, and that's why offspring from 2 parents are all very different individuals. Okay, now we're moving on to the process of natural selection. Okay, and this is where an environmental factor acts on a population and results in some organisms having more offspring than others. Okay, members of a species with an advantageous trait will survive and have a higher chance of reproducing, therefore passing on their genetic material, okay, than some members without that trait. Alrighty, so let's think about this, and we're going back to our insects that we spoke about a lot. So first of all, we've got variation in a population in a certain trait. We're looking at insects here, and you'll see we've got beige beetles and green beetles. Now, there is a differential in the reproduction, or the fitness, the ability to survive and reproduce. So in the second picture, we can see that we've got this bird that likes eating green insects, maybe because the brown ones are camouflaged, okay? So we've got that fitness for the environment. So more beige insects are going to reproduce. So we have more beige insects here. And then our end result after time, because that green insect in number 3 will get eaten again, our end result is a population of beige insects. here we can see natural selection again in its steps in picture form. Okay, so when we think in natural selection, we've got that step where we've got the variation, but then we've got that fitness, and this is what we're talking about. When we talk about selecting agents, in those pictures we looked at just now, it was a bird eating the green insects. Okay, so for natural selection to occur, there's a selection agent that's acting upon the population. Okay, and what that results in is some organisms having a better chance to survive, and therefore if they've got a better chance to survive, they've got a better chance to reproduce. So our selection agents can be biotic or abiotic. So in terms of biotic, you could have a predator, so biotic meaning living. You could have a predator like our bird in the previous example, but then it could also be like a pathogen, it could be competition. We also then have our abiotic factors, such as, so these are non-living, so temperature, fire, soil, nutrients, water, things like that. So they are our abiotic non-living factors. So many selection agents act by killing the less fit or the poorly adapted individuals. That is the end of our first video. Take it easy and remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel.